for more than a season.
It's that thing, isn't it? If a driver who's used to winning spends enough years fighting for points in Formula 1, they get out of that mindset of I'm a winner. And Charles has come in, as you say, dominant in GP3, dominant in Formula 2, and steps into a Sauber that wasn't to his liking. Tried to change himself. No, sorry, got that wrong way around. Tried to change the car, and then realised it wasn't about changing the car, it was about changing himself. Changed the way that he drove, got to Baku, smashes it into P6, was it? P5? And suddenly he gets it. And so, again, having that wherewithal, having that strength of mind and character to adapt oneself, to change to the given circumstances, and to change your driving style to the car. Give him 4 races in a Ferrari. Learn how to drive the thing. Yeah, he'll be pushing.
How impressed were you that we've heard a lot of drivers, certainly in this type of regulation with the wider cars, saying that they've had to adapt. To recognise that so early, were you impressed by that?
Oh, massively. Massively, because you saw, I think it was China when he was going through turn 1, 2, and he just, just ran wide and beached it. And you're like, that's not the Leclerc that we know.
Yeah.
There's something up, and he was chasing the car. And we see it with Giovinazzi in the sessions that he's done, where more than often than not, he's ended up with a thing in the wall. It looks like he's chasing the car. For Giovinazzi, it's always looked like he's about half a second behind the car, and he's all arms and elbows.
Yeah.
But for Leclerc, he just wasn't happy, just wasn't at one with it. So to have that, and he said, he had to go away, look at himself in the mirror. What am I doing wrong? What do I have to change? And then realise I've got to change myself. If the car isn't changing to what I'm trying to do to it, then it's not the car, it's me. I've got to change me. And then to learn literally within a week, and go out there and put in that most amazing of performances.
And it really was. It really was.
It was just incredible. This is the quality, and this is the quality that's going up against Sebastian Vettel, and that's not to detract from Sebastian as a full-time world in any way. But to say that he's not going up against anyone normal. He's going up against a guy who has the potential to completely reshape or shape the next 10. We thought it was going to be Max Verstappen, but there is every reason to believe that it will be Max, Charles, possibly Esteban Ocon.
Yep.
That shapes the next decade and a half of this sport. And Charles doesn't want to wait around. He's not going to Ferrari to make up the numbers. Nobody goes to Ferrari to make up the numbers, because if you're making up the numbers at Ferrari, you're out.
Which is why it was slightly strange to hear them say we're going to favour Sebastian early on.
I mean, I think they have to say that, don't they?
And it's going to be very
interesting. But the fact they've said it as well already. Oh, we're going to favour Sebastian. Sebastian's sitting there going, I don't need any favours, I'm a 4-time world champion. But it also, does that then start to play in Seb's mind? Wait, hold on, do they think this kid's as good as me? And so there's already that scope of, and again, it's this fascinating thing at this time of year. Who puts their marker down at the team?
Yes, absolutely.
Are you going to have a team leader and somebody? Oh, here we go. Red Bull's out for what will be his second lap of the day. Interesting. Take a look at this car. There is a fascinating panel at the top of the nose. You can just about see that there. They've been running the S-duct for quite a while on the car. There is now a panel above there, which sort of redirects the airflow. Basically, the S-duct comes from underneath the nose, goes through the nose, and allows for a low-pressure pocket underneath the nose to essentially suck that down and give you a bit more downforce on the front. There is now a panel at the top, which I believe redirects that airflow, which should increase the suction underneath the nose. I'm not the best technical person to talk about this. Underneath the nose, which should improve the bite at the front end of the car. And the Red Bull's always been very pointy. It's always been a car that's driven on its nose. And we see the rake again of this car very low at the front, very high at the back, and that's because it's quite a shorter wheelbase car than the Mercedes or the Ferrari, and that really helps them to get the most aerodynamically out of their package. But yeah, that's an interesting development, certainly. And we're seeing on some of the other cars, I think the Renault doesn't even have an S-duct. So, potential there for something a bit different.
Okay, we've had 92 minutes of...
Have we really?
We have.
My
it's flown by.
word, hasn't it? Just we're only here for 4 hours today. 16 hours this week we've got to talk about.
16 hours.
16
There's
hours,
a lot
mate.
to talk about.
I mean, there is. I hope we haven't gone through it all already.
Well, if we have, what happens? We're going to have
We'll go over it again.
Yeah, great,
Yeah.
great format. That's a
that's the
little
way
bit
we'll
of
do
an
it.
insight into the production meeting there.
We had a production meeting?
No.
No.
The magic happens live on air. That's the joy of joining us here on F1 TV. And in the first hour and a half of 2019, we have seen Kimi Räikkönen have a spin. We've seen 1 lap, now 2 laps, and you get another look at that massive DRS letterbox as the element goes
vast,
up.
Isn't it?
It is huge. That is going to be really interesting
Max
to see.
has gone the long way around.
And
that's the old
is
track.
he bailing out? It is indeed. So Verstappen maybe not having the easiest morning, as we see Daniel Kvyat appearing and coming down to turn number 1. He is currently set. He is currently set 10 laps. This is lap number 11 that he's on. We've had Kimi Räikkönen spinning into the gravel, needed to be recovered by the truck. We've had Romain Grosjean spinning at turn number 3. A little bit of a moment for Sebastian Vettel coming out of the chicane. And now we have seen a few moments of the circuit from Hülkenberg, and now Verstappen going the long way round at turn number 10. Bottas going out once again. Most laps of anyone in the field. Sebastian Vettel, who is the fastest on a 1:20.9. So we have covered the car number 77 with just going for the practice start there. Yellow flag in the background. Valtteri Bottas with those wins to his name, just the 3 of them. He is a 30-time podium finisher in Formula 1.
Don't use all your stats up on day 1.
Well, I'm going to try not to. I make no guarantees. I make no guarantees at all. So, a driver with huge capabilities. We've covered that he is under major pressure. A little bit falling off the back of the car there.
Was that?
I don't know if he went over a leaf, but there aren't many trees around. So I think there might have been something coming off the back of that Mercedes. But this is what testing is for. And he goes on to another outlap. And Verstappen, did he return to the pits?
Oh, there you go. Here's the replay.
So did something come off the back, or was he just over?
No, just went over it. I think that might have been a large leaf. Oh, maybe.
Dunno.
Oh, maybe.
Not entirely sure. The drama of testing, eh? The drama of testing. So, Valtteri Bottas facing, I mean, Hamilton in the form of his life. Let's make no mistake, Hamilton has gone to another level in the last couple of years. Weirdly, we've heard very little about Lewis Hamilton over the off-season. Did all of his winning,
I think
disappeared,
that's
relaxed.
That's Lewis Hamilton now, isn't it? It's been a shame to have lost his interaction on the social media. It was always, I think, incredible to see how open he was in revealing that very private side of his life to the world. But when it all kicked off over the winter last year and he pulled back, it's been very telling that everything that's gone up on social media has been paid promotion. And I think that's been quite sad to see that happen. But at the same time, I think it's allowed Lewis to enjoy his private time just for himself. It's allowed him to go away, to reset when he's needed to, and to come back to the track and just be better than I've ever seen him. He's been phenomenal. The last 12 months, the Lewis Hamilton that turned up race after race after race was unlike any Lewis Hamilton, any version of Lewis Hamilton that I'd seen before. To see him take a car so close and sometimes over the perceptible limit that he found himself scared and shaking after qualifying was incredible. I mean, and I use that word advisedly. Yeah,
Silverstone was
Singapore. I mean, he was physically.
That was an extraordinary thing to see.
He scared himself. He scared himself. He went so. He took so much out of himself and out of the car.
Yeah.
That he actually scared himself. And then that's amazing, you know. And you hear Senna talk about that, you know, the moment that when he crashed at Portier, because he had those laps where he was literally had an out of body experience and was watching himself drive the car. You sort of sit there and think, yeah, it's nice and it's all flowery and all part of the magic and mystery of Ayrton. But to actually for me to stand there and talk to him after that qualifying session, and to see him physically shaking and try to explain what he'd been through and how he pulled that lap out, it was astonishing, because you realise, my God, he did actually go beyond that point. He was so in the zone.
Silverstone and Singapore were,
phenomenal.
Incredible. I mean, Singapore was a real, Singapore
it was
obviously
like a
telling
video game
last year, but this year, it just, when he wasn't expected to take
and
pole position, and that's been their weak track, and then to see him put in that lap in Singapore really just told the whole story of where his level of driving is.
The fact that it's, A, that he's scared himself, B, that he surprised himself, that he could draw something out at that level. It's got to be terrifying for the other drivers as well.
And when he's comfortable, when he's relaxed,
oh boy,
that is bad news for the other 19 drivers on the grid. And he does seem to be, with all of his experience, now knowing that 5 titles, there is no argument. He's in every top of all time. In the top 10 list, no argument. He's got his place, and now it's just for the joy of driving.
Absolutely.
There is no need, and I think there is a great testament to Lewis Hamilton in that he could have walked away a while ago when it was difficult at Mercedes. He'd done his winning. Once you get to 3 titles, that's the magic. That's what Fernando was always chasing. 3 titles, the Senna benchmark, if you like. Every driver sort of relaxes at that point.
Yeah.
But he just seems to be so hungry now.
Absolutely.
And when they were releasing the shakedown video the other day, you hear him yelping like a child for the first time. And he described it as like feeling like he was in the car for the first time. There's not a lot of nonsense with Lewis. When he says it, he means it.
I completely agree, and it's got to be scary for everybody else. But I think having Lewis raise his game every weekend has helped the team to do the same thing. And we talked about Ferrari entering the last 2 seasons with the strongest car. It's a team effort at Mercedes that's allowed them to overtake Ferrari in the last 2 seasons, and a lot of that has come obviously from the way that Toto manages that team and runs that outfit. And I think after Spa last year, he said that they put so much pressure on themselves that they stopped having fun, and he wanted them to have fun again. And I think that's been a key part of it. It's just enjoy themselves. You see that with Lewis, is how much he's enjoying himself and how much that's allowed him to raise his game. I think it's what Valtteri lost last year, because he lost that joy, he lost that enjoyment because the pressure kept on mounting.
And make no mistake, this is a tough paddock to be in. When
When
you're
it
on
goes
top, it's phenomenal.
Yeah.
No better place to be. When it goes wrong, it can be very, very lonely.
Yeah, because people will jump on it.
And it's strange being in a lonely environment when you're surrounded by hundreds of thousands of people.
Yeah.
So you're always under the microscope, and yet if it's going wrong, all you want to do is shut yourself away. But there is no shutting yourself away.
Especially not if you're one of those 20 people that is the focus of the sport. But yeah, Lewis has taken himself to another level. The team has taken itself to another level. If we get to a point where Ferrari turns up with the best car again in Australia, and Mercedes have to pull it out again, I mean, make no bones about it. It is a huge job that the team has had to do to keep picking itself up, to keep fighting relentlessly.
The motivation.
It's not, people who look at Mercedes having won 5 titles in a row and sort of decry it as some, nobody can beat them is ridiculous. No, actually, yes. Ferrari could have beaten them.
Yeah.
Very easily, but it's only because of the work that Mercedes have put in to actually get back on top again. Can they do that for another year? Do they have it in them to consistently work? I mean, does anyone have it in them to consistently have to work that hard? It's a huge ask.
And I think that would be a question for Hamilton in terms of motivation. I mean, I always go back to the Mika Hakkinen example of he reached the peak, and he was always, from the point that he'd reached the peak, you kind of got the feeling that he'd put so much emotional energy into it that it was very, very difficult for him to ever give that much again. Conversely, we've seen Hamilton, I mean, this race when he was breathless on the radio a couple of years ago was a real indicator of, he just relished it. This Max Verstappen at turn number 9, flush of sparks there, and beginning to push just a little bit as he goes through his opening few laps. Still under 10 for the day.
I know what you mean. And I think that's the fascinating thing, is that I think Lewis's satisfaction comes from pushing the envelope, from attaining within him himself a higher level, and doing that every single weekend. You know, if he can come into a weekend and think he's had a better weekend than the one before, then it's been a good, you know, it's been a good weekend. It's been a reason to turn up, and I think he'll keep doing that for as long as he can sense and can feel himself improving. He'll keep doing it. The second that he turns up at a racetrack, and we were talking about it earlier about Robert Kubica.
Yeah.
These guys know if they are no longer having fun, if they no longer drive at the level that they once did, they'll go and do something else.
And that seems to be a very decent time to bring in Kimi Raikkonen on circuit. He could have chucked it all in.
He got it very easily.
I think I certainly expected, you leave Ferrari, that'll do, the end.
But you know what? Oddly enough, in agreeing to leave Ferrari, I think the last sort of half of last year, found that love again. And a genuine fun for what he was doing, you know, winning in America. And I interviewed him in Brazil, and he was just hilarious. It was absolutely hilarious, and he was just loving it again, just really enjoying himself. And again, he doesn't have to do it.
Yeah, I think there's something really, really nice about Kimi Raikkonen choosing to, of course, he was with this form of the team when he started his career, and just very, very interesting that he chose to continue. Maybe it's because he's walked away from it before.
Yeah.
And he knows what the reality is once you leave. And what did he want to do? He wanted to come back immediately. So he went off, had his year rallying, got it out of his system.
Did NASCAR trucks and all of that kind of stuff.
And then was like, yeah, probably back to Formula One.
Yeah.
And so, with that in mind, he quite clearly wants it to stretch on for as long as possible. And I'm not sure everyone would describe Kimi Raikkonen as motivated, but you've got to have a lot of motivation to come back again.
I asked him last year. I said, you know, how's your motivation? And he said, as bad as always. You know.
Well, that was that question that he was asked at the press conference, like, you know, do you want to, you know, why are you still having fun? And he was like, no, this is all mind games.
Yeah.
And he was just irritated to even be asked. Like, his presence is the motivation. That's why he's here. The ever-popular Kimi Raikkonen.
He just loves it, though, doesn't he?
And,
you know, and why wouldn't you, for heaven's sake? You're one of 20 Formula One drivers in the world.
It's very interesting. When Gerhard Berger retired, he had to be dragged out. When Martin Brundle retired, had to be dragged out. When Damon Hill retired, parked the car. It's so interesting when drivers get to that final stage that they take it in one of two ways. It's just a desperate need to escape, or there's a feeling of, like, I want this to continue for as long as possible.
They always say, don't they, that the great sports stars die twice. Because you have your retirement and you lose that thing that has defined you for such a long time. And so, you know, when you lose a part of you, when you lose that core element of what makes you, don't worry, folks, this isn't happening live. This was this morning when Kimi beached it on his first lap. And now, obviously, he's out on track.